there is no doubt that there were a series of imminent attacks that were being plotted by Qasem Soleimani. We don't know precisely when, and we don't know precisely where. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Secretary, the administration said this strike was done based on an imminent threat, but this morning you said we didn't know precisely when and we didn't know precisely where. That's not the definition of imminent. The president has also suggested that there was some sort of attack being planned against an embassy, perhaps several embassies. Can you clarify, did you have specific information about an imminent threat, and did it have anything to do with our embassies?
We had specific information on an imminent threat, and those threat stream included attacks on U.S. embassies. Period. Full stop.
With all due respect to the Secretary of State, he's lying through his teeth.
It's the faithless logician, dropping what's been missing, coming for the jugular, but not let me catch you slipping. No tool needed other than my mind to dissect these delusions and correct them in real time. The slayer of dogma and baseless assertions don't come with that weak shit or you'll soon need a surgeon. But it's too late for your argument. It's been torn and shred. There is no coming back. It is completely dead. All I need is my brain and my pen to use as I see fit to flay and or mend these inexcusable policies that are impossible to defend. All I need is my brain and my pen. No trust needed, just take a second and listen as I redirect and clear your clouded attention to focus on the facts, evidence, and testable predictions, painting a picture to help explain these insights, hypotheses, and suspect claims, giving you the tools needed to separate the truth from the false and the utterly inane. The marks are legion and too many to name, but they all love money, bathing in it with no shame, while the rest of us fight over their scraps, struggling just to maintain. They've never read a war that they would not fund, yet they treat citizens asking for healthcare as low-life scum. But we're done asking, so get ready, because here the we come.
That was former intelligence officer and UN weapons inspector Scott Ritter responding to the baseless and bothersome reasoning given for the assassination of another country's top general and diplomat on a third allied country's soil. Here's a longer clip from his interview with Aaron Maté.
Scott Ritter, if you could respond to that, Pompeo saying, all in one sentence, there were a series of imminent attacks. We don't know precisely when, we don't know where.
Well, if we don't know when, then they can't be by definition imminent. And if we don't know where, we can't really call them an attack. We can call it we have a general feeling that Qasem Soleimani was planning something against us. That lacks urgency. So with all due respect to the Secretary of State, he's lying through his teeth. And I think Congress would do very well to hold a hearing, bring him forward, get him under oath, and grill him on this. Because he's not telling them the truth. Anytime we hear a government official say that we can't tell you more because of sources and methods, it means they're lying. They're not telling the truth. The fact is, throughout history, the U.S. government has declassified extremely sensitive information when it served their interest. I'm a former intelligence officer. There are ways to declassify. There are ways to write around a source so that you can get the gist of the information out there without giving away the specific nature of how you got it, et cetera. But you put that sources and methods shield up there when you're trying to hide the fact that this isn't about a really hot piece of intelligence. This is about analytical judgment. And if the lead up to the Iraq War has taught us anything, the intelligence community's analytical judgments are very sensitive to the political demands of their bosses. And there's no doubt in my mind that the Trump administration has been leaning very heavy on the intelligence community to provide some sort of intelligence-based justification for an operation that was decided well prior to any targetable information coming up about Qasem Soleimani.
As I detailed in my last video, the United States has been trying to dig its claws into the Iranian government since at least the CIA-backed coup of Mohammad Mossadegh in 1953. But focusing on more recent events, the Trump administration's first act in laying the groundwork for war was to unilaterally and without warrant renege on the Iran nuclear deal, also known as the JCPOA, which ensured that Iran would not be capable of developing nuclear warheads. This was followed up by re-implementing the crippling sanctions that had been lifted for Iran's participation. They were also slapped with a fresh round of sanctions for good measure. Sanctions that disproportionately affect the poor and innocent. Sanctions that are nothing but economic warfare. Sanctions that are a tried and true tactic of our intelligence community, used in hopes of undermining and destabilizing a country from within, ultimately making it easier for regime change. The next key step was taken in April of 2019 when the United States designated a branch of the Iranian military as a foreign terrorist organization. This unprecedented act of naming a branch of a sovereign country's military as terrorist prompted the Iranians to follow suit. A month later, as the United States was deploying an aircraft carrier to the region, the Iranians used what little leverage they had and began increasing their production of enriched uranium. In May of 2019, oil pipelines in Saudi Arabia were struck by Houthi rebels out of Yemen. The United States blames Iran, who helps finance and supply said rebels. So they are indirectly responsible in exactly the same way that the United States is indirectly responsible for the horrific, immoral, genocidal siege warfare currently ravishing Yemen. On June 20th, a United States military spy drone was shot down either over international waters or Iranian airspace, depending on which story you believe. This almost led to a retaliatory strike that was called off by Trump at the last minute. The attack reportedly would have hit 3 different sites, taking out an estimated 150 people. Instead, the Trump administration ordered a fresh round of sanctions, including specific sanctions on Iran's foreign minister, Javad Zarif, which would be like Russia or France putting sanctions on our Secretary of State. This led to more enrichment of uranium, which triggered, you guessed it, more crippling sanctions. I have to point out that if the United States was actually concerned with Iran getting a nuclear weapon, they would have stayed in the JCPOA. But clearly, that is not their goal. As Scott Ritter alluded to at the top of the video, and as recent reporting suggests, the decision to take out Qasem Soleimani was made months, if not years ago. All they needed was an excuse. On December 27th, American contractor and linguist Nahrez Hamid was killed by rocket fire that may or may not have been launched by Kataib Hezbollah, which is one of the Shia militia groups that make up the Iraqi Popular Mobilization Force, which spends most of its time fighting ISIS. Same ISIS that is known to be active in the area and has attacked U.S. forces there in the past. But instead of waiting for any hard evidence or facts to even be accumulated, Mike Pompeo and the other war hawks of the Trump administration decided to launch a round of airstrikes, killing 25 members of the Iranian-backed Iraqi militia. The strike that took out Soleimani, as well as Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis, the leader of Kataib Hezbollah, may all be part of the same retaliation, but this seems a little overkill even for the U.S. These airstrikes did lead to the storming of the United States Embassy in Baghdad by thousands of pissed-off Iraqis protesting the airstrikes and the occupation of their country in general, which some point to as the impetus, and though there was some damage done to the building and tear gas was sprayed, luckily there was no casualties, so that's probably not the reason either. Another intriguing and very disturbing possibility is that Trump ordered the assassination of 2 of Iran's top military personnel simply to shore up Republican support in the Senate, senators who will ultimately hold the president's fate in the looming impeachment theatrics that began this week in Washington. Theatrics, mind you, that'll keep progressive senator and presidential frontrunner Bernie Sanders off the campaign trail during the critical last stretch before voting starts in Iowa early next month, giving centrists such as Biden and Buttigieg an unfair advantage, though thankfully it doesn't look like that'll have much of an impact. But the lack of evidence of any imminent attack has both Democratic and Republican lawmakers furious, specifically conservative Senator Mike Lee, who called the intelligence briefing on the Soleimani assassination, quote, probably the worst briefing, at least on military issues, I have seen in the 9 years I've been here. But this is nothing new. The intelligence community has been lying us into war since at least the infamous Gulf of Tonkin incident, one of 2 very flimsy cases cited for entering the Vietnam War, where some particularly dense storm clouds were mistaken for enemy combatants. And before the fog of war could settle and the American people had a chance to realize what had happened, the United States was knee-deep in the bloody conflict. Or the first Iraq War, where we were treated to a stellar performance from a young Kuwaiti girl who tearfully detailed an atrocious account of heartless Iraqi soldiers ripping infants out of incubators and tossing them to the cold, hard floor.
My name is Nayira, and I just came out of Kuwait. It's the second week after an invasion. I volunteered at the Al-Adan hospital with 12 other women who wanted to help as well. I was the youngest volunteer. The other women were from 20 to 30 years old. While I was there, I saw the Iraqi soldiers come into the hospital with guns. They took the babies out of the incubators. Took the incubators and left the children to die on the cold floor. It was horrifying.
Which all turned out to be nothing more than a completely fabricated horror story designed to rally the American people behind the first Iraq War. And unfortunately, it worked. The second Iraq War would take a whole video to cover properly, but it includes such highlights as giving us the Orwellian Patriot Act, which enables the intelligence community to spy and collect data from any and all, completely gutting the Fourth Amendment and right to privacy. Planting bogus stories in the mainstream press to use as justifications for war, torturing some folks, and of course, outright lying to the UN and the world about weapons of mass destruction. And more recently, the alleged chemical attack on the city of Douma, supposedly committed by Bashar al-Assad against his own people, which is proving to be nothing more than a false flag perpetrated to incite and justify escalations by the United States, which turned out to be the poetic airstrikes that almost made Brian Williams come in his pants.
We see these beautiful pictures at night from the decks of these two U.S. Navy vessels in the Eastern Mediterranean. I am tempted to quote the great Leonard Cohen, "I'm guided by the beauty of our weapons," and they are beautiful pictures.
If I had to choose just one reason why we want war with Iran, it would have to be the almighty petrodollar, which I intend to cover in more detail in subsequent videos. But very briefly, the petrodollar is basically an agreement between Saudi Arabia and the United States that ensures virtually every oil transaction that takes place on the world market must first be converted to American dollars, which enshrines the dollar as king of all currency. This seldom talked about arrangement utterly dictates our foreign policy, as well as many domestic ones, and is a key reason why the United States is so reluctant to get off fossil fuels and embrace green technology. But of course, they don't need a valid reason to go to war. For them, the ends justify the means. As the late, great Smedley Butler put it, war is a racket. So what I'm trying to say is, don't believe the hype. Like, subscribe, and share. Shana.
That's kind of like the mission of my show, is to remind people how we got Trump. People want to pretend that corruption and lying started in January 2017. The Afghanistan papers just came out, Joe, that revealed that 3 administrations in a row lied completely 100% about Afghanistan from the day they took over to the day they left. Stuff like Donald Rumsfeld saying, we don't even know who the bad guys are. We have no idea who they are. Well, why are we there? It's worse than you think, but we can still just keep sending $4 billion a month there. Just keep sending it. Just keep sending it. For what? No one knows. We're not leaving. Trump didn't take us out. He's up for re-election in a couple more months. We're still in Afghanistan. He didn't do what he said he was going to do.
Nobody does.
That's the problem, and that's why we got Trump in the first place.
Why,
because Barack Obama comes in as an anti-war guy, immediately gets rolled by the military-industrial complex, just like Trump did. I believe that. I did believe that Trump, his druthers would get the hell out of the Middle East, right? But he doesn't really have any druthers. He's like, okay, I'm done doing that because they've rolled me hard enough. 3 years of Russiagate, I'm going to do what they want. Why do I think this happens? It's because just what Eisenhower said as he left. He says the undue influence of the military-industrial complex. And Joe, imagine they just invented $131 billion more worth of work for Raytheon and Boeing and Halliburton. How much money does the recording music business make a year? 80 billion? I mean, how much does it? We've just invented a whole nother economy. Just since Trump got elected, 131 extra billion. I mean, just think what you could do with that. You could build 131 Yankee stadiums.
Do you think
every year?
Non-cynically, do you think that a lot of this impeachment stuff and a lot of the scandal stuff is really a distraction for a lot of these things they're pushing through?
Yes, it's 100% distraction. And just like I told you, because if they really believed that he was doing all these things and he was, why would they keep giving him extra money to go bomb people at his own behest? They don't try to put handcuffs on him. So that's how you know they're full of shit. And the reason why they're coming at Trump in the way, there's ways to, so now they're starting to oppose him because of this Iran thing. So now you turn on CNN and Chris Cuomo goes, hey, why doesn't Congress do its job and take back the war powers? They they gave into the president under this AUM. So now, which is what I predicted would happen when Trump, the silver lining of a Trump presidency was all the shit that the Democrats and Republicans have been agreeing on, which is war, fracking, opening the Arctic to drilling, all that stuff, gassing immigrants at the border. Now we're all going to become aware of it. Well, the Democrats spent 3 years doing frickin' Russiagate, so they didn't ever oppose him on that stuff, and they let him keep doing it. And so now people are starting to become aware of what's happening. And so now Chris Cuomo is going, hey, why doesn't Congress do their job? Why are you letting crazy President Trump? Well, they just gave him 131. They gave him his spying powers again through the Patriot Act. This guy who's working for Putin, you're going to give him spying powers? You fucking bullshitter! They're all fucking bullshitters. Arrgh.